It was a warm summer evening when I got a call from the Hendersons, a family I frequently babysat for. They needed me to watch their two children, Emily and Jack, for the night. I agreed, eager to earn some extra money before heading off to college. When I arrived at the Hendersons' house, everything seemed normal. The parents gave me the usual instructions. Bedtime was at 8 p.m., snacks were in the fridge, and they'd be back by midnight. The kids, 6-year-old Emily and 8-year-old Jack, were excited to see me and insisted on playing board games before bed. As the night wore on, I managed to get the kids to bed by 8:30 p.m. I settled on the couch with a book, enjoying the quiet. Around 9 p.m., I heard a faint noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like whispering. Assuming it was the kids trying to stay up late, I went upstairs to check on them. To my surprise, both Emily and Jack were sound asleep in their beds. The whispering, however, continued, seeming to come from the direction of the hallway closet. My heart began to race as I slowly approached the closet. I hesitated, then opened the door. Inside, there was nothing but coats and shoes. Trying to shake off the unease, I returned to the living room. Just as I was about to sit down, I heard the whispering again, this time louder and more distinct. It seemed to be saying, "Come play with us." Panicking, I called the Hendersons, but there was no answer. I then tried calling my own parents, but the call wouldn't go through. Feeling trapped and terrified, I decided to wake the kids and leave the house. As I entered the kids' room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Standing at the foot of Jack's bed was a shadowy figure of a young girl, her eyes wide and staring directly at me. The figure vanished as soon as I blinked, leaving me gasping for breath. Gathering my courage, I woke Emily and Jack, telling them we were going on a little adventure. I grabbed their coats and ushered them out of the house. We waited on the front porch until the Hendersons returned home. When the parents arrived, they were shocked to find me and the kids outside. After hearing what had happened, Mrs. Henderson revealed a chilling piece of information. Years ago, a little girl named Sarah had lived in the house. She had died tragically in a fire that started in the closet where I heard the whispers. Since then, the family had experienced several unexplained occurrences, but nothing as direct as what I had encountered. Needless to say, I never babysat for the Hendersons again. The second story happened when I was a high school senior named Mike. I had agreed to babysit for my neighbors, the Thompsons, who had a 3-year-old daughter named Lily. It was an easy gig, and the Thompsons paid well. The evening started off smoothly. I played with Lily, fed her dinner, and put her to bed around 7:30 p.m. I settled in the living room to watch TV, feeling relaxed and confident. Around 8 p.m., the baby monitor crackled to life with soft static. I heard Lily talking, which was unusual since she usually fell asleep quickly. Curious, I listened closely. Lily seemed to be having a conversation with someone. I could hear her say, "No, I don't want to play that game." This was followed by a pause, and then, "Okay," but only for a little while. I assumed Lily was talking in her sleep or playing with an imaginary friend. I decided to check on her to make sure she was all right. As I approached her room, I heard a second voice through the monitor, low and indistinct, but clearly not Lily's. Alarmed, I opened the door to Lily's room. She was sitting up in bed, facing the corner of the room, seemingly engrossed in a conversation. I asked her who she was talking to, and she replied, "My new friend. He says he used to live here." I felt a chill run down my spine. I quickly scanned the room but saw nothing out of the ordinary. I told Lily it was time to sleep and tucked her back into bed, trying to hide my unease. Returning to the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried to focus on the TV, but the baby monitor crackled again. This time, I heard faint laughter, followed by Lily's voice saying, "That's funny." I bolted upstairs, bursting into Lily's room. She was standing by the window, staring into the darkness. I asked her what she was doing, and she turned to me with a puzzled look. "He wanted to show me something outside," she said. Desperate for answers, I called the Thompsons. Mrs. Thompson answered, and I quickly explained what had been happening. There was a long pause before she responded. "We never told anyone, but when we first moved in, we learned that a little boy had died in this house. His name was Tommy. He fell from that very window." I felt a wave of nausea. I gently led Lily back to bed and stayed with her until she fell asleep. For the rest of the night, I stayed on high alert, every creak and whisper putting me on edge. When the Thompsons returned, they thanked me for my vigilance. I shared the night's events with them, and they decided to consult a local priest to bless the house. I never babysat for the Thompsons again, but I often wondered about the little boy named Tommy and whether he had finally found peace. Our final story involves a night when I was a college student named Sarah. I was babysitting for the Millers, a family new to the neighborhood. They had a 4-year-old son named Ethan, who was an energetic and imaginative child. The night started off like any other. I played games with Ethan, read him a bedtime story, and tucked him in by 8 p.m. I then retreated to the living room to study for an upcoming exam. Around 9 p.m., I heard Ethan talking in his room. Figuring he was just playing with his toys, I decided to let him be. After a while, the talking turned into laughter. I decided to check on him to make sure he wasn't getting too wound up before sleep. When I entered his room, I found Ethan sitting on the floor, surrounded by his toys, giggling and talking to thin air. I asked him who he was talking to, and Ethan cheerfully replied, "My friend Mr. Tim. He comes to play with me sometimes." Thinking it was just an imaginary friend, I smiled and told Ethan it was time to sleep. I tucked him back into bed and returned to my studies. Half an hour later, I heard Ethan laughing again. This time, it sounded as though he was in the hallway. I found Ethan standing outside his room, staring into the darkness of the hallway. "What are you doing, Ethan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mr. Tim wants to show me something," he replied, pointing towards the end of the hallway. My heart pounded as I followed his gaze, but there was nothing there. I gently led Ethan back to bed, assuring him that Mr. Tim would have to wait until morning. As I left his room, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I settled back in the living room, my nerves on edge. Moments later, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and I heard a faint whisper, "Come play with us." Terrified, I grabbed my phone and called my best friend, explaining the situation in hushed tones. My friend suggested I call the Millers, but I didn't want to alarm them unnecessarily. I decided to wait it out, keeping a close watch on Ethan's room. Around midnight, the whispers grew louder, echoing through the house. I could make out distinct words, "Come play forever." I bolted to Ethan's room, finding him sound asleep. I stayed by his side until the Millers returned home. When they arrived, I recounted the night's events. Mrs. Miller's face went pale. She revealed that the previous owners had a son named Timmy who had died in a tragic accident in the house. He was known to be a playful and mischievous child, and it seemed his spirit hadn't moved on. The Millers thanked me for my bravery and decided to seek help from a paranormal investigator. I never babysat for them again, but I often wondered about Ethan and whether Mr. Tim had found a new playmate.